Today we have with us Sri Swami Chidananda Giri ji, the esteemed President and Spiritual Head of Yoganandas Satsang Society and Self-Realization Fellowship. Swamiji has dedicated his life in spreading the teachings of Paramhans Yogananda ji. Swamiji, in normal times, it is easier to understand and follow the teachings of great gurus such as Paramhans Yogananda. But in the face of deadly pandemics like COVID, or for people living in war zones, it seems impossible to find relevance in divine teachings. What is your advice in such situations?
Well, I have to confess to you, I find the question a little bit counter to what my experience has been, in this sense that not only with this recent pandemic and the war in Europe and Russia and the other great chaotic symptoms of unrest around the world, natural disasters and so on, not only those, but going back years and decades, our experience has always been that difficult times are the times when people are most benefited and most energetically and enthusiastically seek out some sense of anchorage, some sense of security, some sense of being able to keep their feet on stable ground when all around and the world and in their personal lives is in such upheaval. So when you ask how is it relevant, I would really say that the teachings are more relevant at that time. You know, think about this. Paramahansa Yogananda ji, his lifetime spanned 2 world wars, worst wars that humanity has ever known, Great Depression of the 1930s, the dawn of atomic war, which hopefully we will not be witnessing again at the end of World War II, the vast period of social, economic change on all levels of society. Now, to think that the teachings that he brought would not be relevant in situations as such as that, that would be just counter to the manifest demand and proof of that thousands and millions around the world have been turning to his, number 1, his techniques of meditation, number 2, the how to live skills that he teaches just for navigating through times like this, just for being able to access and bring out of one's soul these qualities of what? Fearlessness, discriminative insight, to know what to do in shifting situations, compassion, desire to help others who are even in worse situations than we might be, the ability to endure difficulties, and the ability to maintain one's equanimity no matter what difficulties. These are the foundation of the self-realization and Yogoda teachings, because these are the skills, these are the qualities that are native to every human being in their soul, just waiting to be discovered. And if I could add to that too, you know, it's very interesting. You think about one of the great, probably the greatest scripture of yoga in all time was given when? By Lord Krishna on the very eve of the most cataclysmic and destructive war probably in India's history. And so to think that what Krishna told to his disciple Arjuna was not 1000% relevant to times such as this, that would be, again, counterintuitive to the millions and billions who have turned to his words of advice, his words of counsel and reassurance down the centuries.
Swamiji, in these times of extreme material progress, there are distractions like never before. Could you provide some practical tips to bring back balance in life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can give it to you in one word: meditation. You see, as the world has gotten more complicated, and particularly with the advent of the online barrage of information and distractions, some very useful, no doubt, we won't downplay that, some of it less useful, some of it downright destructive. But in the face of that ceaseless barrage of the senses and the mind and the intellect that most people around the world in all countries are subjected to, we're finding, and people are finding, that an absolute survival skill is the ability to meditate, to go within, to go beneath that chaos and that mental chatter, that mental disruptiveness, and access those levels of peace within. And without that, people will either be miserable or worse. You know, they'll certainly lead a very unfulfilling and miserable life. So meditation is a survival skill in today's world.
Swamiji, India is celebrating its 75th year of independence, and India's global impact is also seen more prominently now. How do you see India's future?
Our great Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, who of course was one of the earliest and most prominent ambassadors, spiritual ambassadors of India's lofty divine spiritual heritage to the West, and then by extension to the rest of the world. And he was so proud of what India had nurtured, what India had preserved from centuries, millennia past, of India's great spiritual civilizations in the golden age of her civilization. And so what his, one of his primary objectives in his mission was to draw people's attention around the world to what India can offer as the world moves into this phase of a more global civilization, a more complicated, technologically driven civilization. He often would say this: it was all about balance. And he used to say, from the pulpit to audiences around the world, he would say, I predict that a harmonious combination, a harmonious balance of the progress and material efficiency and technological abilities that are characteristic of Western civilization, combined with the ancient spiritual values, and especially the spiritual science, the techniques, not just philosophy, but the actual methods of meditation that India has offered the world. By combining those two, he said, we will see the gradual emergence of an ideal global civilization. So India, the other thing that I found in going around India this last time is it's been always a joy to share with our Indian YSS devotees in these meetings. I always remind them that coming from the West, what an admiration, what a great sense of respect that individuals from US, Europe, other parts of the world have for India's spiritual culture. The world is looking to India. The world is looking to India. And that's both a blessing and it's also a responsibility. That it's a responsibility and a challenge that India has to now step up and reclaim the glorious spiritual, lofty ideals and practices and higher state of consciousness that the world expects from India.
Swamiji, as you said, like the world is looking at India. If I add something which is Sanskrit language,
yes,
which is also been like in everyone's life while they are doing or practicing yoga, Ayurveda, meditation, spirituality. So how do you see the beauty in Sanskrit? First
of all, Sanskrit is a very, very powerful vehicle of higher spiritual perceptions. There's a reason why Sanskrit is probably the oldest extant language on the face of the earth today, because it comes from those ancient times of civilization when the world at large had a much more evolved spiritual consciousness. Now let me digress just for a minute. You know, there's this tendency in modern thought, in modern culture, to think that the further you go back in time, the more primitive things were. And I call that chronological snobbery, because it's absolutely not true. The further you go back, the more in these great cycles of civilization, these great cycles of that the world as a whole evolves from higher ages and then gradually descends to the Kali Yuga, lower ages, but then repeats the cycle. And we're now in the upward cycle. We're on the way back up toward that civilization of the Golden Age, from which the Sanskrit language is our best linguistic record. So I would say there's no need for people to necessarily take up the study of Sanskrit, but it's very inspiring to know that the concepts that have been put into modern language by Paramahansa Yogananda, by the other great teachers of India, that those are rooted in those most lofty conceptions that humanity can have, that are beautifully expressed in the Sanskrit language.
Swamiji, thank you so much for giving us your precious time and blessing our viewers with your wisdomful word, kind words. Namaskar.
Namaskar. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you all the best and your viewers.